Hello and welcome to Thinking Outside the Box with me, Tim Box.
And me, Britt Box.
This podcast is all about mental health, emotional well-being and navigating your mind in these strange times. A little disclaimer at the start, do not confuse our advice as medical advice because we're not doctors. However, I do work in the field of mental health and Britt is a fierce mental health advocate thanks to her own journey, which we're going to hear something about today. We do try and approach these topics with a fair amount of levity, but please don't think we're trivialising any of the topics we discuss in this podcast. We just like to come at it, hopefully from a slightly different perspective than normal, hence thinking outside the box.
And before we get started today, I wanted to give a little content warning for today's episode. There will be references to suicide, self-harm, eating disorders and sexual assault. Please don't worry, I won't be going into detail on these topics, but they will be referenced at times when they're relevant to me telling my story, so listener discretion is advised.
And that leads us perfectly on to what the subject of today's episode is. It is all about Britt's story and her journey with depression.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Britt, let's. I'm going to play interviewer on this one.
No, that's fine.
It's going to be a bit like joining me today is inspiration, national treasure, Britt Box. Right, so let's start. So my first question, I think, is when did you first become aware of the term mental health?
So I actually have known of that term for a long while. My mum was a mental health nurse. That was her profession. That's what she did. And she was a nurse both in hospitals and in other places as well. But yes, mental health nurse was what she was. Now, it was really funny because I can remember being quite a bit younger and knowing my mum was a mental health nurse, but I had no idea what that meant. I just knew the term.
What sort of age was this?
Oh, this was probably 10,
You're right.
9, 10.
Because you were in Canada for the first... When did you come from? Because you were born in Canada.
I was, yes. Yes, are you going right back?
Yeah, we're going right back. We're going yes. Tell me what you remember about your birth.
One day in June in Canada.
It was a snowy day.
In June?
In Canada, it is all year round, isn't it?
Yes, I'm Canadian, and I know I don't sound it, but I've been here a while. And I came to England when I was 6, 7, somewhere around there, I think. I do know, I just can't remember. And I've been in England ever since. But yes, so we'd already been in England for a little while, and my mum had been a nurse before she went out to Canada as well. And I'll be honest, I've no idea if she was always a mental health nurse or if she specialised in that later in life. I really don't know, but I do know from an early age that, yeah, my mum was a mental health nurse, but I didn't quite know what that meant.
I see, okay. And so moving on to what we were talking about then about when you became aware of what it actually was then.
Yeah, so when I was younger, I had a bit of an interesting life in that I was a singer when I was a child, and I did West End theatre and appeared on several TV shows and recorded albums that will never see the light of day, ever.
Which is a shame. You have a lovely voice.
Thank you very much.
Say.
And so from the outside, I had what seeming to be a really awesome little life when I was younger. I was constantly up in London, which was very exciting when you're 10, 11 years of age. And I went to a theatre school up in London as well. And I did some pretty cool stuff. You know, our rehearsals were at the same studios as EastEnders. So for half of my summer once, I would watch EastEnders being filmed out of a window, which was quite fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But on the flip side of it, the side that people didn't see, because there's always two sides to everything, no matter what you see on social media, in the news, there's always another side to it. I was going through a really, really tough time from quite an early age. So my mum, as I say, she was a single parent and she was a nurse. So she would work long hours and weekends and the rest of it. And at the time, we lived with my nan and granddad. That's who we moved in with, and we were sort of looking after my nan and granddad, but all the while my mum was working, and she was the only one working and bringing in a wage for the household. So I only got to spend sort of, you know, a limited amount of time with my mum because she had to work.
Yeah.
So when she was at work, my nan was who looked after me, and my nan was a small, feisty Italian lady who had a thick Italian accent and always cooked pasta. And I'm sorry to buy into that stereotype, but that is exactly what it was.
So this is your Italian heritage. That is why you can name all of the different shapes of pasta. Is
Yes,
that right?
and I have a favourite type of pasta.
Oh, and this is why you correct my pronunciation on them as well.
Absolutely.
I see, right.
So my nan and I were very, very close. Like I say, she looked after me quite a bit, and my nan had developed breast cancer, and I sort of knew what it meant at the time, sort of didn't. I just remember my mum being very, very upset, and my nan going through treatment, and me kind of working out what was going on at the time. And then one horrible day in January, my mum woke me up in the middle of the night to tell me that Nan had died, and she was going up to the hospital. Did I want to go with her? And I said yes. And my mum kind of warned me because like I say, my mum was a nurse. She'd been around the dead, and she knew what to expect. You know, it was going to be a shock to her because it was her mum, but it wasn't going to be a cultural.
She knew the process.
She knew the process. She knew what happened when people passed away in hospital. And she asked if I wanted to go with her, and she kind of warned me because my mum was very much a realist. She was, you know, I knew about things I probably didn't need to know at that age from a protection point of view for quite a while.
Yeah, from the things you've told me before, it's very clear that she sounds like a right trooper as well.
Yeah, she didn't want me living in a fairy tale land, which is hilarious because I have a tattoo of Disneyland Paris Castle on my leg now. But she wanted me to know what the real world was like. So she kind of warned me, did I want to come up? It wouldn't look like my nan and all this and that, and I said yes, and I went. And I'll be honest, listeners, I'm glad I did. I know a lot of people have different feelings about seeing loved ones after they've passed.
Yes,
but I'm glad I went, and I will forever be glad I went. And after my nan died, things got a bit weird. So my nan was the matriarch of our family. She did all the cooking, she kept the house, she did everything while my mum went out to work, basically. We also lived with my granddad, but I bless him, I don't think he even knew how to put the kettle on by himself, so my nan did everything. So when nan died, the house had a very, very different and strange dynamic to it all of a sudden, and I was struggling to cope with it, and I really, really missed my nan. And it was around this time that I started to notice a shift in how I was feeling. And it wasn't, how can I put this? It wasn't just, oh, I'm sad my nan is dead, because of course I'm going to be sad my nan is dead. But it kind of felt more than that. It felt deeper than that.
Yeah.
And then a few months after that, I was sexually assaulted in the middle of a town centre, and it was a horrific experience that I actually tend not to talk about. It's not something that I go into. It's not even something I think a lot of my friends or close acquaintances know about, but it is something I wanted to address. And it was horrible, as it's going to be. And that really, really affected me. And that combined with my nan passing away. And then on top of it, around that time, my granddad had started to show early signs of dementia. And my mum was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer. This all happened
around the same phase of your life.
All when I was about 12 or 13. And I couldn't cope with it. I didn't know how to cope with it. I didn't have the strategies to cope with it. So I turned to self-harm. I was cutting myself for a while because I used that as a coping mechanism. And then I also turned to bulimia, which is an eating disorder, as a way of trying to control my life when I couldn't control it.
Were you aware of it as, consciously as this is why I'm doing this, or was it just a sort of...
Absolutely not.
Just a response that you had to it,
I've always been a slightly rounder child, shall we say. So I'd kind of stopped eating, and then would find that I would just binge and then not eat, and binge and then not eat. And I fell down that pattern almost without realising it. But it was only when I was showed up to school, and I used to wear, because I'm slightly older, ladies and gentlemen. I'm in my 30s now.
I mean, older than what then? Because what does that make me?
So basically, I'm of the era of like wristbands and like the sweatbands that we used to wear, that punk pop bands used to wear, and Sum 41, etc. Anyway, so I used to wear those sort of sweatbands around my wrists, and they were used to cover marks.
Wow.
And I can remember once being at school, and I was asked, because I went to a Catholic school, everybody, if you can believe that, and I was told to take them off before I went into a class. Okay. And I remember this feeling of, please don't make me take these off. Please don't make me take these off. It was in front of everybody. And it was a case of, you take them off or you're not coming in. So I took them off, and I was desperately trying to hide any marks. But that's when a teacher saw them. And then what then ensued after that was this avalanche of things that, again, I couldn't control.
Yeah.
So my mum was called. She was brought in. She was asked, look, your daughter is doing this. Did you know? My mum didn't know. She felt awful that she didn't know, because she'd been working. And I'd like to point out as well, at no point do I feel like my mum ever either neglected me or didn't notice or anything. I purposely hid this from her. This wasn't her not noticing. And, you do get a lot of people say, especially with teenagers, oh, they're doing it for attention. They're doing it for attention. And I can, hand on my heart, guarantee, say to you, I didn't want anyone to know or see about this. This was very much I'm doing this because of how it feels, because I needed something. I know it sounds strange, but this was how I'd rationalised it in my head. Yeah. And then from there, I just want to come in there, because I don't.
This is the thing. I know that. So when you've not been through this, it can be difficult to understand. And we might have people listening to the podcast who are experiencing those thoughts, or even taking those actions, or even maybe parents who have kids who are going through that. I've always understood things like cutting and self-harm, because I've heard people talk about it, but I've never really chatted with you about it in detail.
No.
But I know that other people have told me it's almost like the physical pain can just distract you from the emotional pain for a time. It can almost give you a different focus.
So I know that, me personally, when I'm going through a bad time, I don't feel sad. Sadness is not the prevailing emotion. It's not like, the Pixar Inside Out. It isn't like a little sad character. For me, it's numbness.
Right. And so was this about feeling something?
It was about feeling something. Yeah. And so that's why I did it. And then after that, I was told I had to go see the school counsellor, who, by the way, was the school librarian.
Amazing.
I know. Talk about not really.
Hopefully we've come a long way since then.
Hopefully. Yeah. So it was the same as the school librarian. That she then referred me out to, literally, it was like a children's institution, is like the only way I can put it. And then I had appointments there with a therapist there. And then they told my mum, oh, your daughter has clinical depression.
Oh.
Your daughter is has a deficiency of some description. It wasn't, and I can remember at that time thinking, oh, so there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. How did that make you feel?
Like I was broken.
Wow. Okay.
And even though they knew about everything that had happened to me up until that point, it was deemed that no, it wasn't your circumstances that have led you to this. You are broken. Yeah,
it was the chemical imbalance story.
Yeah, I don't think that was mentioned at the time, because this was, what is this now, the early 2000s maybe?
Yeah, I was just trying to work that out.
Yeah, late 90s, early 2000s, I think it was around that time. And I felt awful. And that it just made me feel worse. And I remember saying to my mum, please don't make me see them again. And she didn't. And she was very good about it. But I saw how upset she was in how I was sort of coping with things. So I found other ways, and I kind of, for want of a better term, came out the other side of that by throwing myself into other things. So I'll be honest, because this was around the time my mum started getting really sick with her cancer, not long after, obviously, we'd lost Nan.
Yeah.
And my granddad was starting to forget who he was, who we were. My mind was preoccupied. I was looking after my granddad. I was helping my mum. I was also, at this point, starting my GCSEs.
Because you were also going through that phase of of like adolescence, where
Yes.
you're going into your teen years and going
Yeah.
through all of those struggles that we all go through
Yeah.
as teenagers, all the confusion that time in our life causes. So yeah, I can see how this would be overwhelming.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt. But on the flip side, and this is what I mean, on the other side of it, whilst all this was happening, I was still appearing in shows, singing in things, going to theatre school. I was appearing on things like SMTV, if you remember that, like Saturday morning television. I was doing all those things. So all the kids that I was friends with at school was just thought that my life was completely different to what it actually was.
Do you think that kind of you could bury yourself in that, almost distract yourself from what was going on?
Absolutely. I kind of just switched everything else off, and just started focusing on the things I had to do, which I love doing. This is the thing, don't get me wrong. The times when I was on stage were so happy. They were brilliant times and I loved it, and I would never change any of it for the world. And being there for my mum, you know, I made the decision to not go to my one of my exams so I could sit with my mum while she was having chemotherapy, and I then in the end never got that GCSE, and I would do that again. I would do that. I would never change that decision.
Absolutely.
So I'd kind of just got on with it, which I think is the best way I can put it.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, after I lost both my mum and my granddad, by the time I was 16, 17, I was pretty much on my own. I didn't know what to do. I left school. I got a job. I tried to support myself. And genuinely, at this time, I've said this to you before, I felt weirdly all right.
Yeah.
I felt very, very sad that my mum had died, and I was trying to process that. And I felt very sad that my nan and granddad, because it was literally like, 5 years previous to that, I had everyone.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, they're all gone.
Wow. Yeah.
So I had spent my time trying to process that, but I didn't feel like I was depressed. I didn't feel, and I certainly didn't feel the way I felt those years ago when I was 12, 13, seeing a counsellor.
So I'm right in saying you weren't given medication. You were diagnosed when you were younger,
yes,
but you weren't given medication.
My mum didn't want me on anything.
Right, okay. And when you lost your mum eventually, and as you say, you went through that period where you were like, you felt strangely, like you were coping. What do you put that down to?
Oh, just getting through, I think, survival.
Yeah.
I'd gone into survival mode. I was like, because I remember the day I was told that my mum had passed away, my first words to somebody was, okay, what do I need to do? Who do I need to call?
Yeah.
I was 16 years of age, and I was more concerned with calling my mum's work to inform them, with calling up my school to tell them I was not going to be returning. I was more concerned with that, booking an appointment with the funeral director.
Yeah.
I would thrown myself into that because I didn't know what else to do. And I just remember, thinking, okay, what did mum do when nan died? I'll do that.
Right.
So I kind of went into admin mode.
Yeah.
Like admin mode, basically. And I was seeing a boy at the time.
Yeah.
And I kind of just then spent all my time with him because I didn't know what else to do. And it was only about a year or so later when that, I say relationship in the loosest of terms, because when that relationship ended, that's when
it hit you.
That's when it hit me.
Yeah. And what was that kind of like?
Emptiness.
Right.
Loneliness, sadness, and this overwhelming numb feeling of my life will never be the same again. Wow. And I was 17, I think, 18 at this time, and I didn't know what to do. So on the advice of a friend at the time, I went to the GP.
Yeah.
All the time as well. I can remember being really scared about telling the GP, because I can remember the first time round when I saw the counsellor at that sort of children's home, that there was talk of me staying there for a while. And because I must have been 17 then, because I can remember that thinking, I'm under 18, they're going to put me away.
Right.
They're going to take me and put me away somewhere.
Yeah.
So I was reluctant almost to go to the GP. And then when I did go, again, I kind of explained everything that went on, and I was told that was when I was told, oh, you have a chemical imbalance, and was given strong antidepressants at the GP.
Wow. Did you have this? I don't know. It baffles me a little bit because when I hear this sort of story, and you're saying, and I felt like life would never be the same again.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd never be happy again, or something like that. And for me, that kind of sounds like a very healthy reaction to everything that you regard life to be, and the happiness of life of being pulled away from you, and kind of you will no longer have. And I find it, when you lay it out like that, it sounds almost like a strange response to tell somebody they're ill for feeling this bad about all this bad stuff.
Yeah.
I
agree. But from that moment on, I had labelled myself as, oh, I must have been broken all those years ago when they told me I was broken, or it was kind of that feeling of, oh, I'm back to where I was when that happened. It was almost like I was never going to escape it, because, oh, well, I couldn't have come back here if I'd escaped it. It was that kind of feeling. So I was on the antidepressants for a number of years, but I had just tried to get on with things. So I just, as I say, I got a job. I was just trying to live my life. I went through a few jobs, actually. I was never really happy in any one job, except the time I worked at Build-A-Bear. I really enjoyed working at Build-A-Bear.
Well, Build-A-Bear, Build-A-Bear's everywhere.
Exactly. So I just got on with it, because what else are you supposed to do? But there were periods of mental uncertainty, I think is the best way I can put it. And there was at one point where I felt myself slipping down into quite a dark place. In my early 20s. And I, again, I reverted back to the things that helped me before. I say helped very loosely, obviously, because I started self-harming again. And it was at this time that I tried to take my own life. Unsuccessfully, obviously.
Obviously. Hopefully.
You've just been talking to a ghost for the past.
Say, don't drop that. That's a bombshell on me.
And I tell you what it was. I didn't want to die.
No.
I didn't want to live. I didn't want to live in the pain. I wanted the pain to stop.
See, I hear that so much. In terms of people that take their own life, they don't want.
No.
But they don't. They want to get away from the pain.
Yeah, and I genuinely thought this was how the pain was going to stop. Because it was relentless. Because no matter what happened, I genuinely believed at the time, it didn't matter where I was, who I was with. I wasn't with my mum. I wasn't with my family. I didn't have my happy life anymore, and I was never going to get it again.
Yeah, right.
So I was scared that I was never going to feel true happiness again. And that is a terrifying prospect.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, is what depression is.
Right. See, this is actually what I wanted to talk to you about when you were telling this story, is what do you feel depression actually at its core is? And it's interesting to hear you say this idea that I'm not going to feel happiness again.
Yeah.
Because whenever you've told me about this, and obviously, I've not been through this, so I can never fully understand to that level. But the way you describe it to me, it kind of, it sort of makes perfect sense in terms of where you ended up emotionally, because for all of those years, this was your happiness. Everything that...
It was my stability.
Yeah, and everything you would call happiness and joy and comfort and the safety that you had, all centred around your family. Yeah, and then when that goes, there is this bit of you obviously thinking, well, I know what I think happiness is, and some key component elements of that thing now will never be there. Yeah,
and I thought that because I'd lost them all at such an early age, and I didn't have anything. I'd like to point that out. I didn't have anything, and I thought, I'm never going to make anything of myself, and my life is going to be nothing of noteworthy, because I had nothing to start with. I don't know. It was also such a juxtaposition from the life that I'd had when they were alive, in that was going to theatre school. I was, I
Yeah,
was doing
yeah.
singing. I was on TV. I was on
So it's
West
almost
End.
like all of your ambitions
Absolutely.
had gone in then.
I stopped singing, and singing was such a creative outlet for me. It was what I really enjoyed doing. But I stopped publicly singing, with the exception of karaoke, when my mum died.
I'm very thankful you still do karaoke. That's good. I'm glad that's Well, here's the thing. I know when I met you, yeah, and you told me about this, and I kind of it made me understand why you love to sing, because I feel like there's something about that joy that nothing will ever take away, and those times, and I just I feel like it's almost like when I see you sing, there's a bit of me that kind of, I don't know, connects with that part of you that I never knew.
Yeah.
And I wish I could have been there.
Well, this is it.
To help.
This was all going on. So I'm talking about when I was sort of 19, 20, and you and I met when I was, 24? 24, 25? So it wasn't...
26.
Was it 26?
Yeah.
Oh, God. But it wasn't that long before I met you that I was kind of in the midst of all this.
See, this is the thing. I think about it as like ancient history when you talk about it, and then I'm like, oh my God, no, this was just like a matter of months before we met.
Yeah, this wasn't. I mean, well, this is the funny thing, I suppose, is that. So then I'd come back on a more even keel, and I was carrying on, and then I had a really bad summer, so my appendix burst. Which I don't recommend. It's awful. And I got septicemia.
Can I just say,
yeah,
the universe owes you something.
Doesn't it though? Doesn't it though? Doesn't it?
I feel like people listening to this are going, give the girl a break, for God's sake.
I promise it has a happy ending. But no
spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. But my appendix burst and I got septicemia and it was awful. And it was horrible.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And if you've watched my TED Talk or you've followed me at all, then you'll kind of know where this bit is going. But to shorten a long story that I've already made quite long, it was at this point that I found baking, and I'd never baked before. My mum couldn't cook, bless her. My nan, different story. My nan was an amazing cook. My mum could not, and I started baking, and I really loved the feeling that it gave me, and I threw myself into it as I do with things that I enjoy. And I started a baking business. I was making cakes for people. I stopped that a few years ago to focus on other parts of the business. But I've now been running She Who Bakes, which is the name of my business, for 10 years in November. So that's that's been my constant, I suppose, through all of this. And even though I don't bake anywhere near as much as I used to, because that's what happens, unfortunately. If you have a hobby and you turn it into a job, it doesn't suck all the joy out of it, but it does put a filter on it.
Loses a little bit of its luster.
It does. So, now I only bake really for work, for magazine articles, or when I fancy eating something particularly tasty.
I love it when you just bake for fun, because you don't get to do that very often, because you're baking for other people and sort of fulfilling orders and bookings.
Yes.
And then when I just see you in the kitchen, you're saying, I just thought I'd make some. I'm like,
yeah, that doesn't happen as much. You just like it because you get to eat something.
I'm going to get some tasty treats. That's what I'm thinking there. But also I like it because it's like, it makes me feel like, I think you're in a good place when you just bake for fun. It feels, I mean, you could say, well, hang on, I'm baking stuff to snack on, so maybe that's not, but I feel like that's a good you that is in the kitchen by choice.
Yeah. So it was around the time that I found baking, but I will say this, and this is why I'm going to say it this way. I think it wasn't like I picked up a mixing bowl and all of my troubles were solved, because that is not what happened. I started baking and it was fun. Absolutely. However, not long after that, and before, I went to a really, really dark place again. And again, I tried to end it. And I know it sounds like I'm just incompetent, but I kind of hope there was a reason that none of my suicide attempts went through. And I didn't want to die. I just wanted the pain to stop. And I'm kind of condensing, 32 years into 30 minutes right here. So it does sound like I've never had happiness, but which just isn't the case. It was very much good times and bad times.
Yeah.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, if you will. But the problem is that when I had bad times, I very quickly went from, I think I'm okay, to, oh, why am I waking up in hospital? It felt very, very quick. It felt like a sharp, swift change.
Yes.
So there came a point though, and this is kind of why I wanted to tell my story, because there came a point where I came off antidepressants, and haven't been back on them since. I came off them, and I had, to my best of my knowledge, come out the other side.
Yeah.
I was very much like, I am out the other side of this now. I used to be ill, and now I am better. I was blind, but now I can see.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling this overwhelming, oh, that's done.
Yeah,
fab.
sort of, yeah.
Much better now.
Side.
Yeah, I'm out the other side now. And it was around that time that I applied to do the TED Talk.
Yes.
Because I thought that my talk of adversity to success would be one of inspiration, one that people would want to hear.
Yeah.
And I maintain that. I think I'm really proud of my TED Talk. It's probably one of my proudest achievements.
It's a great TED Talk, and people should check it out if they haven't heard it.
Thank you. It is. If you are looking for it on YouTube, it's in my previous name, so it's under Britt Wyatt, The Courage to Continue. But you'll be able to find it on YouTube, and I loved it, and I felt very, very proud of myself. Now, here's the thing: when I finished my talk and when my talk went up, I remember getting a lovely, lovely message from somebody saying that they related to everything that I'd spoken about. But a sentence they said in their talk was, oh, I too suffer with mental health difficulties. And I can remember at the time, almost arrogantly, thinking, well, no, I thought I made it. I thought I made it quite clear. I'm absolutely fine now. And I had this kind of aura of, well, it can't touch me now.
Yeah, because you've been there and you know it and you've come out the other side.
And I thought, there's no way, with my life the way it is, with everything in place, with who I've got in it, there's no way this can touch me now. And I was wrong. I was wrong. And I only found that out the following year. So 2019 rolls around and I feel a loss, as you know, because you live with me and you heard it all. I felt like my life had no purpose. I felt like I didn't, I know it sounds really dramatic, I didn't feel like there was any point to my existence.
Yeah.
I'd fallen out of love with a lot of the things I was doing, and I felt like I didn't have anything anymore.
Yeah.
And that sent me down a dark road. And I can remember thinking, no. You're better.
Yeah.
You're fixed. You shouldn't be feeling like this. And almost suppressing it to the point of doing me damage.
Yeah. Yeah, so you were like in a whole new level of denial. Not that you weren't recognising it or weren't aware of what it was that was going on, but you were recognising it, but were refusing to believe or allow the possibility that you were in a dark place again.
Absolutely. I was shutting the door on it. I was going, nope. And guess what happened? It made it worse because those feelings weren't being heard. Those feelings weren't being listened to. If I'd had stopped and gone, okay, I'm not feeling good. Why? Yeah. Why am I not feeling good? I would have unpicked a book that said, you feel like your life has no point or purpose. You are struggling to find joy in the things that you are doing. Maybe you should look at changing them. Maybe you should do something new. Maybe you should take up a new project. I didn't hear any of that. I didn't want to hear any of that. So I spent the majority of the year angry at myself for feeling sad, which only then resulted in me feeling more sad, and which didn't result in me trying to do anything about it.
So here's the thing. When you start to feel bad again, do you then start to question your idea of, well, I was down because all this happened, and then I worked my way through. I found a new type of happiness, not the happiness that I had with my relatives, but no better, no worse, but a different happiness was available to me. And you come out the other side of it. Then you go back into a dark place, do you then start to believe the doctors who were saying,
at that point,
you have
yeah,
an illness?
Absolutely. I remember thinking, oh no, this has just been there the whole time. This has just been there under the surface, and I had buried it. But what I didn't realise was those feelings were actually burying the emotion that I needed to listen to.
Right.
So I just remember thinking, no, they must be right. I must be. As soon as I started indulging it, that was, oh no, I am actually broken.
Yeah.
That was then harder to then hear what was really going on. So I had that going on at the time. I can remember you and I were in Barbados in 2019. We were in literal paradise.
Yep.
And you were out at the restaurant, I think, and I'd popped back to the room to get something. And I remember being in the room, and I remember leaning on the balcony, and I remember looking out at the blue swim up and the palm trees, and I had tears in my eyes because I felt sad. And I remember at the time thinking, if I'm not happy in paradise, I will never be truly happy. And that then sent me down somewhere dark, because again, as I've said, and you and I agree on this, that I believe that it's the absence of light that takes us down rather than anything else. And I remember feeling that way. And then, God, I'm talking a lot, I do apologise.
No, don't apologise at all.
And then we hit 2020.
Just when we thought.
Dun, dun, dun. And I honestly, and this is why the start of the pandemic hit me as hard as it did. Because I promise you now, right, at the end of 2019, October, November 2019, I had started my university degree. I was like, what do I enjoy? I enjoy writing. I'm going to do... I'd never been to university. Yep. I never even did my A-levels because of reasons that we explained. I barely scraped through with a couple of GCSEs. Yep. No one in my family had been to university. And we'd spoken about it, and you said, you enjoy writing, go do writing.
Yeah.
So I found the degree. I'd started the degree. As well as this time, I do aerial sports, I do hoop, and I do pole fitness, and I love them. I've actually done pole for many a year and hoop for many a year. But it was around this time that I was really invested. I was really going for it. I was training about 8 hours a week. I was covered in bruises and I loved it. You know, I was really, really throwing myself into that. I'd also started weightlifting, and I was getting personal bests each week. We had got annual passes to Disneyland Paris, and we were going to Disneyland Paris every so often. We'd gone on several holidays. I honestly, toward the end of 2019, I was like, my life is good. And I was like, you know what? That bad time I was having earlier in the year, I can see the light. I'm coming out the other side of it. I can see the light. And I was like, this is amazing. And I absolutely loved every part of my life and what was going on. I was so happy. I felt I'd found a bit of a purpose. I felt I'd found things I enjoyed.
I think this is actually, I just want to interject
here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The thing that you're saying, it makes absolute sense to me, because it feels like, you know, just to rewind a little bit, you know, from my perspective of what I'm hearing from you, your personal perspective, and me stepping outside of it and looking at what's going on, you get to the point where you start to, you know, so when you started to bake, baking being initially a pleasant distraction, something you can enjoy, take your mind off of the dark stuff. But then, of course, it becomes a purpose, because now you're starting to build your business, for example. You're starting to become known for what you do. You're starting to build a following on social media, and it becomes more than just a distraction. Then it becomes a passion, and it becomes something that you're really proud of building as well. And then there was that moment where you didn't necessarily instantly fall out of love with it, but it stopped being the thing that you thought it was going to be, I suppose.
It stopped being the thing I could go to cheer me up, because it was my job.
That's it. And so it didn't hold the same place in your heart anymore. And I think that was, I wouldn't say existential crisis, but you know, when you were saying, I don't feel like I'm worth anything, I'm here, what's my point, that sort of thing. That's what can happen when we lose an actual, you know, a thing to shoot for.
It felt a bit like grief as well. It felt a bit like losing something again, of which I have lost so much. I suppose it had become like a foundation stone on your own identity, I suppose. And then, of course, that crumbles. And suddenly everything's fallen to bits again. And I remember at the time, I felt so like I'd let you down, you know, because, and I know this is how partners
will often feel when their partner goes through depressive times or
Yeah.
suffers with this stuff, because I mean, you feel like, well, they should be happy with, I'm not doing my job, am I? Because
Yeah.
they pile that on top of the fact this is what I do for a living, is help
Yeah.
people with this.
Well, and as well, then I felt guilty for feeling down because I didn't want it to be a reflection on you. So I had guilt about the feelings as well.
Yeah. Well, this is what I strongly suspected, was that you were keeping half of it from me because you didn't want to give me those feelings, like I was letting you down, you know. But fortunately, my kind of my ego is I'm happy for where we are now. I know it has nothing to do with what's going on with me, because I feel like I understand it on some level in terms of the reason you were in a good place then when you were doing your uni work, because you literally you kind of found that thing that you'd always loved, and you now had a purpose. You knew you wanted to be the first person ever in your family to have a degree. You knew you wanted to be a writer. That's what you loved doing. And this is the thing, well, I've seen that ever since I've known you, how much you love when you start writing. You're gone.
I'm Alexander Hamilton.
That's it. You're just like you're working, day and night. Why does she write like she's running out of time? That sort of thing. You're all the way in there.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. And also you had the things you were doing with your fitness, your aerial and weightlifting. That wasn't just distraction. That was making you feel awesome about you.
All your exercise endorphins.
Yeah, it's bosh. I mean, what I mean is that it was you building you.
Yes.
And that's an amazing thing when we find that passion. Yeah. So your work passion was there. Yeah. Your self-development and kind of well-being passion was there.
We were going on holidays. We were going on trips.
Your pure, indulgent, joyful times were there as well. And our relationship, as it's always been, was amazing.
Rock
can
solid.
I just say? Yeah, exactly.
And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah, it's like Grand Designs, the latest series, where you get to that bit in it where, and then 2020 happened.
Yeah, it feels like Kevin McLeod should be commenting on this. But and then that's exactly what happened. And then I can remember in March, April, June, July, August, September, feeling so angry that my life, that I had spent so long in turmoil, that I felt again, no, I just got it to where I wanted it to be. Because I love routine, I'll be honest. As much as I love doing nothing, I love routine. So the fact that I had pole on this day, I had weightlifting this day, I had uni work on this day, I had work on this day. I had scheduled in my weeks, and I loved the schedule. And I loved what I was doing and when I was doing it. And then come March, boom, stop. Everything stopped. And I know it stopped for everyone. I'm not unique in this situation. But everything stopped. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this will be a thing for a little bit, for 3 weeks, as we said in the last one. And then when it carried on, I was like, oh, and I felt my grip on my reality slowly loosening. And I felt like, I think the way I described it to you, I felt like at the start of the pandemic, I was holding a big bunch of balloons, and each balloon was something I enjoyed. It was aerial, it was hoop, it was writing, it was this, it was that. And one by one, those balloons were being popped until I had no balloons and I was falling on the floor, and that's kind of how it felt. And then that's when I got sad again. And that's when I hit a really bad place. But this time it's felt, and I know I'm not alone here, just based on the messages and emails that I've received from people who listen to what I do, it has felt like a roller coaster, a corona coaster, if you will. And it feels like some days you feel like you're at the top and you can cope with it, and some days you're at the bottom and you absolutely can't. And it's been that up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down that has resulted into, again, what we've referred to, emotional exhaustion.
Yes.
Now, the reason I wanted to tell my story and the reason I wanted to get all of this across from start to finish was not for people to feel sorry for me, was not for people to be like, oh God, hasn't she been through hell? Because I know I have, I lived it, it's okay. But it's to know that so many times in my life, I was told that there was something wrong with me. I was told that I was broken, that I needed fixing, when really, if I lay it all out to you as I have now, are you really surprised I was struggling to cope with life? Is there any shock that as a young teenager, losing someone closest to me, going through something awful like I did, that I was feeling like I couldn't cope with life? That when I lost my rock, my mum, my number one, like, and then when mum died, I didn't just lose mum, I lost my singing, you know, I lost my stability, I lost my home. Is it any wonder I didn't want to carry on?
Yeah.
And then again and again and again. And I feel now, it's only now that I can sort of step back. And I'm not saying I've got all the answers. I'm not saying that I'm fixed by any stretch of the imagination. As I say, I had an awful, awful day the other day where I truly believed that I was in a depressive spiral that I wasn't sure how to get out of, but I did. I just want to tell people who are listening to this, who might think that they're broken, that you're not.
Yeah.
I think now that every time I've gone through a bad phase, if we can call it that it was a perfectly acceptable emotional response in conjunction to what I'd been through.
And I think as well, it's important to point out, at the time when you went through the first bit of depression that we've acknowledged since I was with you, we didn't really know what was going on.
No.
We couldn't necessarily attribute it to, oh, well, this has happened. You know, it wasn't like we'd had some trauma or incident. Yeah. And it was more about the direction that life had taken us and where you felt you were in your journey, you know, and it was very much a lot of subtle drivers that you get to the point where you wake up one day and you start to think, what's the point?
Yes.
And that can be coupled as well with pressures as well on you so for example, you know, I remember at the time my business was starting to go to the next level and I was doing well, and I remember you saying to me, I feel like there's pressure, you know, I should be contributing more, I should be doing more, and all this
should be keeping up with you.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and it's like all those things that are not deliberate, obviously, and they're not necessarily overt in that they hit us in the face, but they're just that little thing that weighs down on us that little bit more, and before we know it, we've lost our footing in our own happiness.
And I can remember as well the pressure I put on myself, that I'd felt like a fraud.
Yeah.
That I felt like, well, for the past 4 years, I've planted my flag in the sand and said, look, I'm better, I'm okay. And oh no, I'm not. Yeah. And I felt like I had been lying to people. Yeah. I had been, you know, fraudulent. I don't know, but
I think the thing we've got to remember is that life never stops throwing us challenges.
Yes.
And we never stop learning how to deal with them. And when we get thrown one that we're not familiar with, or we didn't see coming, or we haven't got the strategies on board to deal with right now, then we might expect to get knocked over. And that's okay, I think. It doesn't say anything about us as a person if we're going through a phase where we're struggling. And I think as well, we've spoken about this a couple of times, that when you've been down to the depths,
I was just about to say this, you know the way.
Yeah, you know the way. Yeah, that's the way that it needs to be put, isn't it? It's like you recognise the path there. So you kind of start to be concerned about, am I going down that path a lot earlier than someone who's never been there before?
And because I knew what certain roads that path took me on, I didn't want to go down those paths again. I didn't want to use those strategies again. Yeah. But I was worried if I started making my way down that path, I would have no other option. Yeah. And that's the important thing. You always have the option. Yeah. You always have the option to not do the things that you've done just because you've always done them. Yeah. Just because that's where I always fell to doesn't mean that's where I will always fall to.
And this is the thing as well, it's worth noting that the solutions, like the action you need to take to turn the corner and go in the other direction, they're not always obvious either. No. And sometimes I know that you went through a phase, literally years, of trying to find what it was that would get you out of that phase. Yeah. And now that we're here, see, I feel like what we're going through at the moment, the thing that we do a lot of is reminding ourselves this is finite, and we will eventually get out the other side of it, because it's really easy, isn't it, to feel like there is no light out there when we're in the midst of it.
Absolutely.
And I'm hoping, I'm really hoping that what we can do at this time in our lives is recognise that for all the difficulty that we might go through and the challenges we might face, there is this natural passing of time that we couldn't stop if we wanted to. So the phase that we have drifted into right now, and I know we really hope we're past the mid phase and we're going out the other side of it, but I guess we don't actually know. But for all of that, hopefully we can remind ourselves that this will end at some point, and we will get out the other side of it. And then all the plans that we had in place, all the plans you had in place for your next journey will continue. You know, I've noticed an upturn in you since you've been able to re-engage with your uni work, with the new term and everything, you know, which again, nothing's really happening exactly as we wanted it to.
No.
But that's something that you are able to continue with.
And we might find as well that when we get, quote unquote, back to normal, we find a way of life that's even better than the one we had before.
Yeah.
You know, you keep hearing people talk about when things get back to normal, back to normal, back to normal. Well, what if we have a new normal? What if during this phase, you know, for example, we've been going out for a lot of walks. I'd like to make that part of my life, and that was never part of my life before.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is maybe keep yourself open to the things that you've lost, because you might find new things to add to that as well.
It sounds tremendously cliched and oversimplistic to say there are good things that come out of the pandemic as well, but there actually are. It's a cliche, I suppose, because it's true that we're going to come out of this phase and we've learnt more about ourselves. We've learnt more about life and what happiness is for us, and we might be a little bit more mindful about where we put our energies, and maybe not taking certain things for granted as well that we've done before.
I guess the reason for this episode, I wanted to tell my story. And again, this is the Crib Notes version. This is just the quickened version that I could do. I wanted to tell my story so that you guys who are listening know where I'm coming from, know where I sit on the matter, and why I think I can talk about these things, because I've lived through them. You know, we've not even talked about anxiety. That's its own beast. This one has just been depression.
A whole other episode.
Really is, which we will get onto at some point. But the reason I want to tell the story, other than to sort of show you who I am and lay myself out bare, is to let you know that there is hope. There is always hope. Yeah. There is always hope at the end, and to hold on to that, because I know now that when I'm going through a darker phase, if you will, I know I'll come out of it. I know I'll get the other side of it. I know I might go through another darker phase. I'm not saying that, right, my next one should be my last one. I'm giving up on these altogether, you know, my New Year's resolution. And I know that now, but that's the difference. That's what comes with experience. The first few times I went through a really horrible place, I thought I'd be in that dark place forever. I was wrong. Yeah. The time when I went through the least amount of time in my life with dark phases, when it was all light, I was like, I will never feel the darkness again. And I was wrong. I feel like the experience of both of those has taught me that the light and the dark come together. And that when you are feeling through the dark, you will find your way back to the light again. I promise. Even when it feels like you won't. I promise you, you will. And if my sad story leaves you with anything, it is that please never, ever, ever give up hope.
Brilliant. I love that. And also the thing that I think is worth, from my point of view, saying is that I know I've been with you now through depressed times, depressive periods, but I've never had a day with you where we haven't laughed, where we haven't smiled, and where we haven't shared moments that have been wonderful. You know? So I guess, that's what I would say, is that, you know what, we can tolerate a lot of darkness if we can see the light that we're heading towards. Put our focus there. And I think depression will sometimes convince us that there is no light out there. But as you rightly point out, there always is. And, you know, when our mind re-engages and starts looking for it, there's a good chance we might find it.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, my darling, for telling that story.
I'm sorry it was a bit of a heavier episode, guys.
Honestly, I strongly suspect people will get a lot from this episode, and I just want to say I love you so much, and you inspire me so much. You know, and I've got nothing else to say. I think just.
Well, I will then jump in and say, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, guys. If you have, you can come and find us. I'm on Instagram at BrittMarieBox. And Tim, can they find you?
I'm on Instagram at TimBox Mind Coach, and the YouTube channel is TimBox Mind Coach as well.
So please do subscribe. Please do come back for more episodes of Thinking Outside the Box with Tim Box and Britt Box. We will be covering lots of different things. They won't all be as heavy as this, but they are all things that we are taking very seriously. So we do hope that has helped guys do something nice for you today. I hope you have a lovely day. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Bye.